Welcome to Versus, where we talk about all things quilting. I'm Colin Sandberg, coach of the Endurance Collective, and this is Ben Turretz, coach and founder of the Endurance Collective. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning. How you doing, man?
Not bad, not bad.
When was the last time you rode your bike outside?
It feels like it's been a while. We get spoiled by all the blue skies we normally have in North Carolina, and haven't had much of that lately.
No, it's continues to rain, and it looks like continued rain for the next week.
Yeah. So I guess we have an appropriate topic today.
Yes.
Today we're going to be talking about indoor versus outdoor training. And I'll just note that in the past few years, there has been a real boom in indoor cycling. I think that's got a number of factors. You've got high quality, direct drive, electronic, so-called smart trainers, training apps like Peloton and Zwift, Trainer Road, RGV, Ruvi. Then this year, or in the last 12 months, we've had a pandemic, and obviously that has meant that most of the IRL racing and even most group rides have been canceled or dramatically scaled down. And in some countries, it was even illegal to ride outside during the pandemic. So we really saw indoor cycling explode this year. I do want to note that this is a large topic, and our plan is to kind of split this into at least 2 episodes. So as far as Zwift racing or e-racing in general, we're going to save that part of it for a future episode. And my hope for that episode is that we can bring in a couple of people who are real experts as guests. So stay tuned for that. But for now, we're going to just talk about the training side of it. So I guess let's start with some of the basics. I mean, Ben, what do you think indoor training, what kind of obstacles do you think indoor training can help athletes overcome?
Well, obviously, we're looking outside right now. Horrible weather and lack of motivation for going outside. I am a adamant outdoor trainer, and only in the last really since the pandemic started, I've really gotten into indoor training more than I would have even growing up in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it pulls that weather factor out of the game. And it is also a very controlled environment. If you live, say, in the inner city or a place where it's just not safe or hard to get to open road, again, it provides an easy hop on the trainer and do your workout environment. And I have a lot of clients who are pressed for time. Their training space is very limited. So for them to be able to do their intervals in their living room and not have to get fully kitted up and plan a route out, go out through the traffic lights to get to good roads, indoor training provides a really easy conduit to training.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of really good things there. There's a lot, of course, this does depend on where you live, but there's certainly a lot of places where you might have half an hour at the beginning and the end of a ride of junk miles. I know that term is somewhat loaded, but I've got a couple of friends who live in New York City, and unless they want to wake up at 5 a.m. and train in Central Park, they're pretty much going over the George Washington Bridge. So it's half an hour of kind of junk miles to get there, and half an hour on the way back. I've been lucky for the most part where I've lived, but when I lived in China, we kind of had that. It was a big city, and there was a lot of lights just getting out of the city. So that's an hour of the ride right there that are not really high quality miles.
Yeah, same thing when I lived in Queens in New York City. It was like, over the Queensboro Bridge all the way uptown. And then once I got over the George Washington Bridge, that's when the ride started. And that was at best, if I hit every light 49 minutes or something like that to get to New Jersey. And having had some of that China riding experience
Right.
too,
Yeah.
you're scooter surfing to try and get out of town or get back into town in time. So it's certainly a challenge if you live in a dense urban environment.
Yeah. And I think there's another part of this too that I think would be remiss if we didn't talk about, and it's just the danger of riding outside,
Absolutely.
and specifically with traffic. Of course, you can crash at any time. You don't have to have an incident with a car, but um, as much as I love riding outside, and if you were to ask me, what do you love most about cycling, I think really like the you'd have to get at least past the top 5 to find something that you could accomplish indoors. For me personally,
Yep.
there are still days when I ride outside and it just like takes one too many close calls with a car, and I come back feeling really angry, which is then frustrating because I feel like ultimately I do this for an enjoyment and for stress relief. And if I come back just fuming because, somebody almost hit me, it zaps a bit of the enjoyment out of it. And I know a few people who have pretty much just transitioned over to almost exclusively indoor cycling, and that is often a part of it. Or I have a couple of people who became mountain bikers because they
Yeah.
they had one too many incidents with cars as well.
That's the part of this game that stinks. I'll admit personally, I found myself riding on the road by myself less and less often. I'm fortunate enough to have my business partner who I train with on a regular basis, who lives right down the street. But when our schedules don't match up, and I can't get out with you or whoever, I do find myself choosing the indoor option more than I have in the past.
Yeah. So would you agree that it's not really a matter of all indoor training or all outdoor training? I think, most people won't want to be 100% indoor or 100% outdoor. There might be certain periods where you're sort of
Absolutely.
in that mode, but it's really, so we're not really saying, all in on one or all in on the other. It's just a matter of what's the right ratio.
This year, more than any other year I've seen as a coach, repetitive use injuries pop up because of extended amounts of time on the trainer. So like lateral medial knee pain.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the rider transitions back to outside, it's just gone.
That's really interesting.
And it's that fixed position that the rider is in. And, we've worked with rocker plates, and, I have some riders that like them and some riders that hate them. But I've definitely, including myself, you're in such a fixed position. Your body will compensate differently and react differently. And it's one of the reasons doing bike fits that I feel challenged fitting somebody inside versus, spending the time to ride behind them outside and see what their body does in that more dynamic environment,
Yeah.
because they're very different.
That's a real interesting point that I hadn't thought about a whole lot for this, but it totally makes sense, and it is in line with my experience when I've ridden almost exclusively indoors. Those things kind of pop up, and
What's your time limit indoors, Colin? Like what
what's my
where does
time?
where does your head explode?
Well, that's a great point, because I feel like it used to be like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And beyond that, maybe I could do it, or I could do it. When I lived in Northeast Ohio and I was younger, I maybe would ride like a 3-hour ride indoors a couple times a year, but I was always very cautious about overdoing that because I knew it was a great mental strain. Now, I don't feel like it's as much of a strain. I'd still rather be outside, but I mean, I've done 5-hour plus rides this year on the trainer, and I don't mind them so much. And I can certainly knock out a 2-hour or a 3-hour ride without thinking much about it.
Are you burning through like the Star Wars trilogy when you're doing that?
Oh yeah, I have burned through
All the Olympus has
all
fallen
of the
stuff?
dick flicks. At the start of the pandemic, I had this huge list of shows and movies that I wanted to watch that my wife had no interest in. And I was like, okay, let's watch on the trainer. Now it's all gone. Completely blown through.
To you listeners out there, that's where we find so much value. And then we go on the outside rides and we talk about all the stuff we watched on the inside rides.
Yeah, we're very sophisticated people. But do you know anybody who just is 100% indoors or 100% outdoors?
I know one person who is 100% indoors for kind of family caution reasons. He actually races outdoors, but I think he's come to an agreement with his family that he will only train indoors. And then I know somebody who has really almost 100% transitioned to indoor during COVID, because he doesn't want to get hurt and end up in a hospital,
Right.
And run the risk of, getting sick further.
Right.
That was, for me, that was certainly a real concern at the beginning of this. Having a wife who's in healthcare, kind of temper my fear was very helpful, and kept my head in the right place. So I didn't end up transitioning into that bucket, but I know a couple of people. Yeah.
How about, do you have anybody or do you know anybody who's just like still stubborn about the indoor trainer thing and refuses to ride indoors?
No one that totally refuses, but I have some people that are very much resistant to things like Zwift or Sufferfest or anything like that. If they're going to ride the trainer, they're going to download their workout, they're going to put on a podcast with their headphones and, bang it out for 60 to 90 minutes, and that's it. They are already making fun of me because I've transitioned into Zwift.
There's a stubbornness about it, I think.
Absolutely.
Maybe like old school pride.
Me, I how much I trash talk Zwift until, later last year, November, December, I finally caved and started riding Zwift. And now, I've got my bike and I'm trying to get the Tron bike and all this stuff. And,
Yeah.
I didn't even know about this stuff 6 months ago.
Well, there's a gamification aspect of it that can be useful for some people more than others, certainly.
For sure.
But it's easy to make fun of that stuff, but I generally tell people to lean into that. Like, if it helps you, as long as it's not hurting the quality of your workout, like, because you're doing too much intensity or too much volume, that then is good for you, or not really doing your assigned workouts. If it helps you get through it, then lean into that stuff. Totally. Absolutely.
Totally. I do not yet have an athlete who's been addicted to Zwifting.
Yeah.
That staying up late into 2:30 in the morning trying to get extra drops so that they can get a new set of wheels or something. Yeah.
There's people that have stubbornness both ways, or they just get into a real comfort zone both ways. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think as for the outdoor exclusive people, there are times when it's just not smart. It's not about toughness. It's about like what's
The
what's
roads are
smart
icy.
here? You're going to
Yeah.
go out in an ice storm and ride, like, even if you get by unscathed without crashing or something, like, how good of a quality workout are you getting if you're shivering the whole time, or um, I don't know, if you're just trying not to die.
Well, are you thinking about the extra fatigue that your body, like you said, you're shivering because it's 22 degrees out, and that's a ton of extra fatigue on your body. If I go ride my mountain bike when it's below 30 degrees out and I'm all bundled up, even if I'm riding for 90 minutes, I'm more tired after that ride, even if it was a pretty chill ride, than I am,
Yeah.
riding when it's 60 degrees, because I'm also spending time trying to keep warm. My toes are going cold, and, I sound like a whiny little kid right now, but, I'm a whiny old man. Uh, but, there is certainly,
Ages of life.
right, right. Well, a whiny middle-aged man. Um, there are certainly times when the risks far, far outweigh the rewards outside. And I look outside here today, and it's kind of icing and rainy, and I have known athletes that would go ride on a day like today.
Yeah.
We used to joke about hurricane rides, and there'd be debris blowing through the trees, and we're out there like just getting missed by falling trees and stuff, and that's not smart. That's a good day to ride the trainer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as for the flip side of that, the people that are into a big groove with their indoor cycling, other than the fact that they don't want to have fixed position, repetitive use injuries, or any other advantages to occasionally getting outside.
Just breaking things up, man, and changing scenery. It's hard to stare at the same wall all the time, and the same TV. I find it demoralizing riding indoors all the time. It's nice to get out, get some fresh air. It does take some pressure off of, like that dreaded numb ass, sitting down on the trainer. I fatigue quicker, and I know a lot of the riders out there that I work with, fatigue seems to build up a little faster indoors than it does outdoors. And
Yeah.
there's a huge mental aspect to that.
Yeah. I think there's also something with just knowing how riding a bike feels.
Mm-hmm.
Just the feels of things that you don't get indoors. How a bike flexes when you stand up and climb out of the saddle, or you sprint. How the wind feels when it's coming from a certain direction. How a draft feels. How riding over gravel or dirt feels, or rock gardens, just these things. And, for me, and I'm sure this is the case for you as well, it's almost like we're having to relearn a lot of things, like specifically on Zwift. How to draft on Zwift is very different. You have to pay attention to all these visual cues.
Yep.
And that's an art in itself. But the reason we have to learn that is because you don't feel it like you do outside.
Yeah. Yeah. You brought up a really good point. You kind of touched on group riding just briefly, outside, and there's a really good example of this that I've experienced as a collegiate coach, where in the ACCC conference, we raced against a certain military academy on the East Coast. It involved heavily
Not
with
to name
boating.
any names.
Yeah, not to name any names, but they work with boats. We'll leave it there. And the cadets on this campus were not allowed to leave campus during the week. So as a result, all their training was done on trainers. and they were fit, very, very fit. Some of the most dangerous bike handlers as I've ever been around. We always joked about when is there going to be a crash with one of these riders in every race, and it was one of the constants in our collegiate conference was there was going to be a crash, and the reason for it was they were not comfortable riding in a group, and they also didn't know how to ride predictably in a group. And that's one of the most important things you learn riding outside is the feels of the people next to you and how to telegraph to them that you might have to slide over here because there's a stick in the road, or hey, I just got a flat tire and I'm putting my arm up and dropping in the back.
Awareness of those group dynamics.
Exactly. And there was no awareness of those group dynamics. And as a result, there were some pretty horrific crashes.
Yeah. I remember the same thing in a certain ECC military school. It may have been in upstate New York. But and
more of a ground combat focus type of military school.
They may have tanks.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, and to be fair, I think neither one of us is trying to diss like indoor riding and racing. There's a different type of awareness that I think you need to learn there. It's just, like I said earlier, it's all based on these visual cues, not how you actually feel. And of course, nobody's going to get hurt if you make a mistake.
Right. Right. Well, if you didn't tighten your skewer, you might fall through the wall or something.
I've seen it happen. So what do you think some of the challenges are for people in terms of doing indoor training?
Well, I think the entry fee to indoor training can be a bit steep up front. That's the first thing I always, I'm very much a proponent now of getting a smart trainer, because I think it is helpful and it makes indoor training a lot more pleasant. But you're talking about $1,000 price tag to get into it, and then your subscription to whatever program you want to take part in. That's a steep fee, especially for maybe a junior out there who's just getting into the sport.
Sure.
So that's a challenge. On the physical side, temperature is always something I think about. It gets hot real quick because the wind's not in your face. So, again, you're going to the wallet there and buying yourself a nice fan. So, the thing is, once you've got your setup dialed in, it's pretty easy to just hop on the trainer. I've got a busy day here today, and I'm going to squeeze in a 90-minute ride at some point. My bike's on the trainer. The fan's already out. All I have to do is open my laptop, pull up Zwift, and I'm off. And an hour and a half is truly an hour and a half. It's not 30 minutes of getting everything ready, kitting up, and then 30 minutes at the other end. Maybe my bike got soaked and it's covered in mud, and I just don't have to worry about that.
The cooling part of it is really tricky. This is sort of I don't know, one of my things is my athletes know I'm constantly hounding them about fans, because there's not to get too deep into the physics, but there are different mechanisms of heat exchange, and by far and away the main method of heat exchange when you're riding is convection. So it basically it's airflow. That's responsible for, I think, like 2/3 to 3/4 of your heat dissipation. And so if you are just riding there indoors, it doesn't matter what the temperature is. It's not about having a very small percentage is the temperature of the air, but much more is the airflow. And if you're stationary, you have zero airflow. So you have to have not just like a box fan in the corner. You need a very strong fan or multiple fans to really get anywhere near simulating the type of airflow you have outdoors, moving along at 18 to 25 miles per hour or whatever. And just if you think about riding in the summertime, you can go for a ride on a 95-degree day and it's really hot, but once you're moving, a lot of times it's perfectly comfortable, and then you get stuck at a red light and suddenly it feels like your skin is melting off.
Yep.
But the challenge indoors because a lot of us ride, most of us, I think it's fair to say, ride more indoors in the wintertime. And we've got, a lot of us have our indoor trainer set up in a garage or a basement somewhere that's cooler. The last thing we want to do, even with like 45, 50-degree air, is blast that fan, because then suddenly
you get a trainer and you're freezing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like it's tricky sometimes, where I start a ride and I'm in a long sleeve jersey and a hat and gloves, and then I'm slowly turning the fans on and shedding clothes, but then like I hop off the trainer to fill a bottle and I'm cold again. So it's like this complicated dance.
It's I think right at the end there you touched on something, filling bottles. I think people tend to underhydrate too when they ride inside. Making sure that you're hydrating appropriately, because you're not getting as much of that evaporative cooling and convection to cool you down. And like sometimes I get lazy. I'm like, well, I got one bottle, and I'm in this Zwift group ride, and if I get up and get off the bike, I'm going to get dropped. So, making sure that you prepare your nutrition if you're doing a group ride or a race or something is just as important as it is outside.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think if you weigh yourself before and immediately before and after a ride, you'll quickly see that indoors you lose water a lot more quickly than outdoors in general. For anybody who's doubting that, just weigh yourself before and after, and you'll see. On the other hand, for the most part, you would think you can hop off the indoor trainer anytime and fill your bottle, as opposed to outdoors. You have to think about, well, where is there a rest stop? Where's their gas station or a church hose or whatever?
I mean, I forgot my bottle the other day and I drank out of a pint glass during the ride.
Nice. I guess the other thing I wanted to mention there, and I don't want to focus too much on Zwift here, because there are other great apps for this. I think it's just you and I both use Zwift primarily, so forgive us if we're a little bit more focused on this, but there's a competitiveness aspect, and I have seen a lot of people get sucked into regularly going harder than they should be, because it's maybe the same concept as we talked about, like you're on a recovery ride, riding along the bike path, and your famous rollerblading grandmother comes by you, and you're like, I can't have that. But multiply that by 10,000 on Zwift, because there's, at any given time, I mean, I look at the numbers sometimes, hop in 20,000, 25,000 users on like Watopia at one time. So you're going to have people that are faster than you are and whizzing by you, and I'm not even talking about any official group rides or races.
I mean, for the first time, I think it was last week, I had a guy yelling at me on Zwift because I had dropped him, and I wasn't trying to. I was just doing an endurance ride.
Mm-hmm.
He was mad at me because I dropped him, and I didn't notice until later that I had all these messages, and I'm like, I have yet to talk to somebody on that platform. But there's absolutely a tendency to go too hard, chase down the KOM, just like on with Strava, where people are KOM hunting.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely, I've caught myself doing that on Zwift a couple of times now. when I needed a recovery day. I was smoked at the beginning of the ride, and I'm like, oh, epic hill KOM here.
Yeah.
It's only 30 minutes. Let's send it.
Yeah. Well, like, I mean, I think if that's what your workout is, that's fine. We just all have to remember that everybody has a different purpose in
Right.
their workout. And we don't know what anybody else is. Maybe theirs is to do sprints that day. Maybe it's to do an hour time trial. Maybe it's to go, have personal bests or get all the KOMs. We have no idea. We just want to make sure that we are following our plan, our purpose of the ride, whatever that is. Because without that, once that gets lost, you get into trouble.
Yep.
I mean, I think there's no perfect training plan. Everybody has different theories on it, but I do think, have a purpose, follow the plan is one of the most fundamental concepts. Even if it's a bad plan, you can look back afterwards and say, well, this is how I should adjust it. But if you just are like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to go. And then maybe if somebody tries to, come by me, sprint by me on Zwift, I'm going to show them. I don't know. Then you're not really getting much out of that, I think.
No.
So do certain workouts work better inside or better outside?
I feel like that cuts both ways. Like I have riders that do really, like a kind of a crit simulation type of workout really well inside, because they're able to like nail the real specifics of the workout. And then I have riders who would prefer to do long blocks of like sweet spot inside, and like to do the real high variability stuff outside. So I do think there is a level of precision inside that can be achieved higher than maybe outside. And for me, and I guess on the majority side, I think some of the more complicated style of workouts are easier to do on the trainer, because you can set them up, execute them in a very, almost in a vacuum. But if they,
we talked about that a little bit on, I guess it was the first episode with the simple versus complicated workouts. Maybe we can link to that episode.
I think one of the disadvantages of that though are you don't get the real life variability of, like if you're doing certain high-low intervals, say a high-low VO2 interval, the ground's not always going to be the same. You have to execute that with rolling terrain. That's important in a lot of these, and learning how to dose out your effort instead of speed. So yeah, there's definitely advantages to both. I'm a softie with some of my athletes on the trainer, and I will rarely give them stuff over 2 hours inside, because I know for myself 2 hours is about my absolute limit.
Yeah, I get that. I think there's also a matter of terrain. I guess you kind of touched on this, but everyone lives where they live, and there are certain advantages and disadvantages. But if you want to do a 2 by 20 minute interval workout, there's a lot of people who don't exactly have a 20-minute climb right out their back door, or a 20-minute flat stretch of road.
I agree.
I will say I prefer, when it comes to 20-minute field tests, to do them indoors, because I think it's a little bit or to have athletes do them indoors, even though a lot of people really struggle with that, doing an all-out 20-minute interval inside, often because of the heating, the heat regulation issues. But in terms of comparing it from one to another, I think it's a lot more of an apples to apples comparison compared to outside, where even on the same course, even if you say I've got I've got this 20-minute climb that I do is for my field tests. You have different conditions on different days.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Can we go back for a second to the time efficiency thing? Because I guess we talked about this, but you know, why is indoor training more, or is indoor training more time efficient than outdoor training?
Yeah, I think like we kind of talked about initially, once you're set up, absolutely. You know, like if I want to go ride right now, I'm just going to throw a kit and shoes on. I would equivocate it with riding on a warm summer day. You know, I just need to grab my bike, fill my bottles, and go put my kit on, and I'm good. You know, I think the only caveat to that inside is the distractions of family here, coworkers, you know, but on the whole, I think, you know, much less time.
Yeah.
I have never needed to clean my bike thoroughly after an indoor ride. Maybe wipe a little sweat off the top.
Wipe some sweat off.
Right.
You know, at my old job, we could always tell the triathletes because they were more likely to train almost exclusively indoors, and a lot of their bearings would just be corroded from sweat.
Yeah. Yep.
But I also think there's less soft pedaling, there's less coasting indoors.
Yep.
If any. And so, like, I'll generally tell people if they want, they can cut down their volume indoor, at least for like an endurance or recovery ride, cut down your volume by 1/3, and the numbers line up with that. You know, I will if you look at TSS, you know, I probably accumulate outdoors on average 25 to 30 TSS per hour, and indoors it's more like 35 to 40 TSS per hour. So it is about, you know, 1/3 faster. Okay. Bonus question. Now this is a big one, so maybe this is going to deserve its own episode, but I thought it was appropriate this week because a video of Chris Froome surfaced where he was pretty critical of disc brakes, and that set off a flurry of, everybody has such strong opinions about this. So let's see if we can briefly, once and for all, put to bed the question: disc brakes versus rim brakes.
Rim brakes are typewriters, man. I mean, come on. Disc brakes are not impacted by the conditions. You always stop until you burn through your pads. And in relation, although I would say in relation to our current conversation, I would say rim brakes, because man, how many times have you ever squeezed on your rear brake caliper on your smart trainer and push the pistons together? Shame on us for not putting a brake block in there. But generally speaking, outside, I'm 100% disc brakes all the time, every time. Well,
I have a little bit different of a take on this. I mean, I do want to say, I think disc brakes are the way things are going. It is inevitable. You know, we're already pretty much there with, you know, mountain bikes and cross bikes and gravel, anything off road. So
you got a lot of whiteout to use still, so you want to keep your typewriter?
Well, I think really, you know, we're talking about road bikes, and the one thing I don't often hear people bring up here is if you're like a new racer getting into the sport and you want to spend, let's say, $1,000 or $2,000 on a bike, you can get a lot more for your money if you're looking at a rim brake bike. You can get a pretty good rim brake bike versus something, you know, low to mid end with disc brakes. And I would say, you know, 99% of the time, the rim brakes on my road bike, and I still have a road bike with rim brakes, those still work perfectly fine. The next road bike I buy, I'm sure will have disc brakes on it. But for now, it's like those work fine, except maybe if I'm in a race and it's raining, it's the only time I really notice that, because I'm trying to brake.
Right.
It takes
Carbon brake
10
pad,
seconds to slow
drive the
down
rim
and all.
off. Right. Well, the good news is the bike industry is going to make this decision for everyone.
Yeah, so maybe it's a moot point, but I think if you're on a budget, you can get more for your money, and that's just a point I don't hear brought up a lot. And also, I would note, it's not easy to switch over.
No.
Once you've got 6 sets of wheels, you got to switch everything over to the disc brakes.
Listen to how bougie that sounds, Colin. Once you got 6 sets of wheels.
I know.
I'm in that boat too.
But the other side of that is that, like, people are just giving away rim brake wheels, even more so than bikes.
If you need a bike and some cheap Zip 303 Firecrests, there are a lot of pairs of rim brake carbon wheels out there for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, maybe
we should have a whole episode on that. Absolutely.
We could. I'm not sure we'd be saying much that other people haven't said before, but
the fight would be fun, though.
Yeah. I'm amazed at how passionate people are about these.
Me too.
Things. And I do think part of it, especially on the pro rim brake side, there is a bit of old-fashioned stubbornness there.
Absolutely. So,
all right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe. Please leave your comments and suggestions for future episodes in the comments. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.